Well, welcome. Here we are at Joyful Noise Learning, and my name is Ashley. I'm a former English teacher, and I love homeschooling my 3 kiddos. They're in 2nd, 4th, and 6th grade this year. I also love Charlotte Mason inspired homeschool. I'm not a Charlotte Mason purist, but I do love the things that she teaches about living books. I have a couple videos on my channel here about living books and how we make that work and why I love it so much. So if you love reading with your kids, or maybe you just need some ideas, that's what we're going to talk about today. And we used The Kind Kingdom from A Peaceful Press for our guide for our books. Like, what are we going to read this year? And with The Kind Kingdom from A Peaceful Press, it was all about entering the world of Narnia. So we read through the entire series of Narnia this year, guys. It was a lot of fun because I grew up watching the BBC version of the Narnia movies and I loved them a lot. I'm going to talk more about those later, but I had never read the books myself. And we ended up starting at The Magician's Nephew, which is so good. I love that book so much. We've read it twice now, but we started with that one, just a nice refresher. My 7-year-old didn't quite remember it, and neither really did my 10-year-old. So we read it again to give us a good refresher on what that one was about. I was gonna skip The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe because we know this story like inside and out, but my kids begged me to read it. So I was like, all right, let's do it. So, I've read this several times. I taught this when I was a 6th grade English teacher, and we taught through it, which was so cool. But it's just such a good book. So many good themes in here, and it really does introduce you to the basics of the world of Narnia. But what I've learned after reading this one and then reading all the rest, I was just like, there's so much more to Narnia than this one book. We enjoyed The Horse and His Boy, and I had never read this one before. It doesn't take place with any of the regular Narnia characters that you would like, Peter, Edmund, Susan, and Lucy. Aslan was in it, but there was another story where there's a southern area, another kingdom, that is separated by desert from Narnia and another kingdom, and you just learn more about this whole world building here. And the story of this was so good. There's so many great gospel themes in here about being royalty and being adopted into a family, and yeah, it's a really good story. Then we jumped into Prince Caspian, and we hadn't finished the book yet before, so we read through the whole thing. And then this one was funny. So I do recommend the movies that are the BBC versions from the 80s and 90s. I'll link to all of them in the description below because they're on YouTube. You can find them here, or you can get them on DVD at your local library for most libraries. But The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe movie was so good. And then we were like, okay, we gotta watch the Prince Caspian movie after we read this. And I had never seen the BBC Prince Caspian movie. We had seen, the newer Disney make of it, and that was pretty good, a lot more action, good story. And so we watched the older version of it, and we did not enjoy it. It was probably the worst out of all the movies we watched. And thankfully, what we noticed was the BBC versions followed the books very closely, like down to the dialogue. Like you're like, oh yeah, we read that in the book. And they describe the characters very similar to what's in the book. They followed Prince Caspian closely, but as a movie, that was probably not a good choice. As a book, it went okay, but the choices they made for the movies, it made it a very long, boring movie. It kind of looked like it was thrown together last minute. I don't know what happened to that one. I recommend watching it if you want to see a really bad movie, but yeah, that's what happened there. Thank you so much for sitting through my Narnia spiel. I do want to share with you that my friend Katie from Life in the Mundane has invited myself and some other of our friends to share our favorites and our not so favorites read alouds from this school year. So you want to check out Katie's video and the playlist I'll put in the description below so you can learn some more ideas of what we all read this year. And I can't wait to watch theirs so I can get some ideas for what we can do next year as well. So we skipped reading The Voyage of the Dawn Treader this year because we just read it last year, like literally a year ago, and so it was pretty fresh in our minds. This is probably one of our family's favorites. Love this one. We ended up watching both versions. We watched the BBC version and we watched the newer version, and we compared the two, and we noticed, again, the BBC version follows the book very closely, but we did like, the cinematography and the action that flowed a little bit better in acting too in the newer version. So I like both versions of the movies for this one, but yeah. I don't mean to go through all of these, but maybe if you're not familiar with Narnia, this is helpful. If you are familiar, awesome. I'm glad. Maybe let me know in the comments what you think about it. And then we went into The Silver Chair, and this one's probably my favorite. I did watch this movie growing up, and I remembered most of it pretty well. It was 1990, I think, was when that movie was made. So we read the book and then watched the movie with the kids. But I highly recommend reading The Silver Chair and then watching the movie on YouTube or getting it from the library. You got to give the people a little grace. They did a great job for 1990 with the technology that they had. But there are some things that I would have loved to see done a little bit better with the technology we have today. But there isn't a new version of The Silver Chair in the movies yet. So we had to watch the old version. And now we are almost done. You can see there, we've got like 2 more chapters of the last battle. And I was not familiar with this one at all. Didn't know the storyline. There's no movie for it, but we're reading through it now, and oh, this one's intense. I feel like if this one was a movie, it would be a little bit scary for the younger kids. As far as the reading, it's okay, but some of the things they're describing and stuff, I think if it was in visual form would be quite a bit scary, especially for the little guys. But my 7-year-old's listening along to it. My 12-year-old is loving it. She's hanging on every word and loves to hear what's happening. And well, yeah, the 10-year-old's listening too, but my 12-year-old is really enjoying it. So this one, there are some familiar Narnian characters. Both, we just, finished The Silver Chair, and Jill and Eustace show up in this one as well. And some of the original kiddos from this one. But the fun thing about
Hickory and Polly.
Yeah, well, that gives away some of it anyway. And other characters from other books, they show up in this one, which is really neat. The one thing I like about this one is it's the perspective from, so most of the time in these other books, you start with the kids in England and they're going through their things, and then they are suddenly whisked away or find Narnia. In this book, it starts in Narnia, and then you kind of see all the awful things happening in Narnia, and then the kids arrive in Narnia. And I thought that was really cool that C.S. Lewis did that he made some changes to the flow of it to keep it interesting. And I thought that I just really enjoyed that. That was fun. I know in the Narnia series, it's mostly fantasy style, and there are some references to magic and things like that, but there is a lot of references to gospel themes and, who Aslan is and who he represents, and choices that we make. And especially in the last battle, I'm just really finding, he's talking a lot about, there's a lot of, pain and suffering and just things that are not right with the world, but we know that it will be made right someday. And, there is a plan for all things to be redeemed. And that theme really does come through in the last battle. And I've loved reading that and teaching that to my kids. So that's the whole set. We did it. We did it, guys. I was so proud of us. We didn't quit halfway or anything. We finished it. Okay, I have just a few left. We were able to read some other books that were not from the Narnia series. We didn't read too many, but it's because we got stuck on this one. So let me explain this one here. With The Kind Kingdom, it was recommended to read this book, Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage. This is written by Alfred Lansing. And as you can see, it's a fairly large book, and it's definitely, an adult or a upper level teenager reading. And I thought, what, let's try it. My kids are pretty smart. We might be able to do okay with it. So we started it, and as I'm reading it, I'm like, this is not a read aloud. I could read it on my own and go a whole lot faster. I could read it on my own, probably read through it really well, and I really enjoyed the story. It was a really, really neat story because Endurance is about Edward Shackleton. We pulled out another book to read instead, but it's the story of Edward Shackleton, who was a expedition leader who led 28 men to, they sailed on the Endurance to Antarctica, and their goal was to land in Antarctica and walk across it and then meet the Australians on the other side. That was their goal. But that's not quite what happened. They ended up getting stuck in the ice. They took too long to get there, and winter came, and their poor ship got stuck in the ice and was destroyed. So I'm not giving away too much after that, but it was amazing. This story was incredible. It took us a while to get through the book. Well, we ended up reading this one. It took us a while to get through the book, but I was like, we can't stop this one. We have to just keep going. So we ended up not reading a lot of other things in order to just finish this one. We were reading one of the Narnia books at the same time, but we made our way through this one for our history read aloud. So we did not love this one. I decided maybe I'll read it on my own sometime. And my friends suggested this one. They read Shipwreck at the Bottom of the World, and they were reading it at the same time we had started this one. And my son and his friend were talking about it, and I was like, oh, we need to read this version. And I'm glad I grabbed it. It has a lot of fun pictures in it. The language was a little bit easier to understand for my kids. I felt like with this one, I was having to stop every few sentences and explain what I read in their own language. This one was a lot more kid friendly. Yeah, it's just amazing. These guys, this is an actual, that's not like a black and, or that's not like a negative photo. That's like the actual photo they took. They set up lights and they took pictures at night, and they got a picture of the Endurance on the ice at night. It was really cool. They had a really neat photographer who did a really good job. Okay, but if you have kids who love exploration or adventure, or who want to learn more about that, or learn about persevering even though things are hard, hint hint, then I highly recommend The Shipwreck at the Bottom of the World. We had some really great discussions. We just loved just diving into this story and feeling like we were on the adventure with them, you know, and we were like cheering when they did something really good, and then we were like so sad when they didn't, you know, they were suffering and it was hard. It's amazing. There's no other reason other than the Lord giving them miracles in order to survive what they did. It's
every single man survived.
So good. And Elena says every single man on this trip ended up surviving. It's amazing. Oh, we were able to bring, you know, like geography into it. We were learning about the southern part of the world. We learned about animals because they talked about penguins and some of the whales and seals. We learned about seals. And then these men had a team of sled dogs, or a couple teams of sled dogs with them. I would recommend this to older kids or families with older kids, at least 9 or 10 years old and up. Like I said, my 7-year-old listened in on it, but it might have been harder for him to follow along. He did his best for sure, but my 10-year-old and 12-year-old were able to understand a lot better than he was. So if you have younger kids, I would just shelve it and wait until they're older. But if you've got older kids and some younger kids, then you definitely could read this one. And then lastly, we listened to a few books on audiobook. Sometimes we would listen to Narnia like in between me reading it. Like we had a busy day outside of the house, I would listen to the audiobook in the car instead with our Narnia books. But there was one book we did all on audiobook, and that was Breaking Stalin's Nose. This was also in the Peaceful Press Kind Kingdom book guide. This was our last read aloud for the year, and we were learning about communism and Stalin, of course. Stalin's Russia, or Soviet Union, and this was very good. We were learning about communism and Stalin's, what do you call it? Soviet Union. And this was written from the perspective of somebody, I believe, who grew up in communist Russia. A lot of the things that happened in the story were things that happened to the authors, what we found out, but it was written in a very interesting way, like all from the perspective of the boy who was about, my kids' age, who was excited to join the pioneers. He was going to become part of the communist group for kids. And some things happen along the way where he's learning that communism may not be so great. Part of it was hard to listen to, so again, I recommend for older readers or listeners. I went ahead and let my 7-year-old listen, and he did okay, but if you've only got younger kids, I wouldn't recommend it. I would wait until you have 10 years old and older as well, because there are some hard themes to talk about in this. And we had some really great discussions, really good discussions about communism versus capitalism, and what that is, just from listening to the book. And I was able to share a few things that I know, but I really even learned a lot, because there's a lot I don't know about, the time during Stalin, which we found out was right before Hitler in Germany. So poor Europe and Asia in the, 1919 until after World War II, they were just going through some really crummy leaders back then. But we were able to compare it to, biblical worldview. Like, what are some good things about communism? The fact that they want other people to have things. They want people to be sharing. Like we can find some good things from it, but what are maybe some bad things from it? And we even talked about capitalism, the same with that. Like we have in America, what can be some good things that come from it, but what are also some bad things that, you know,
they would punish everyone like for not believing communism, and they're very suspicious about everyone.
Yes, that's right. So we talked a lot about how they were, what Stalin ended up doing, or these leaders during this time, they ended up making everyone afraid of everybody else. So they said, oh, we might have spies. We might have spies. So because of that, it made nobody trust anybody. Everybody was suspicious of everybody. Like you couldn't even trust your own father.
Kids.
You couldn't trust your friends at school. Yeah, they were turning the kids against each other. It was very heartbreaking and made me thankful I live in the time and place that I do now, but it also helped us understand a little bit of the history that some people have gone through. Yeah, and it takes place only over 2 days. So there's 2 days that you hear of, and it's a quick read. The chapters are very short. On the audiobook, the chapters were like 2 minutes long, some chapters. So it was a very quick read. We got through it pretty quickly. But you could easily, oh, there's pictures. Wait a minute, look at the pictures. We'll have to look at the pictures here. So yeah, don't forget to watch the other videos if you want some more tips and ideas for books. Also, if you love to read living books and you love picking your own read alouds, or you do have a curriculum you follow, I did make a planner to help moms organize those things. I have the Living Books Homeschool Planner, and it includes a space to brainstorm the books you want to use that year. And then it has a space to write each month what you're going to read each week. And you can plan ahead as far as you want, or you can just write what you actually read and do reverse planning as you go along, which I kind of do like a hybrid of that. And I have a checklist for a morning time loop as well. So if you want to check that out, I'm going to link to that in the description. And let me know if you've got any questions, and just give me a thumbs up because that helps get the word out and get these videos out to other homeschool mamas. So you are rocking it at homeschool. Go find his joy among the noise. See you guys next time.